Welcome to Crossroads. An insurrection could soon be declared in the United States. They're actually talking about it now seriously. President Donald Trump has suggested that he may invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. This would be massive. Among the many implications, this would give Trump broad powers to deploy the National Guard and the military within the country, but it actually goes a lot further than that as well. Now, also, Trump raised the possibility of invoking the law going back to his 2024 campaign. He was saying it on the campaign trail, and now with his anti-crime efforts, his use of terror designations against gangs, Antifa, maybe other far-left organizations, which he has now talked about, they're ordering, it's going through, and with his attempts to use the National Guard to protect ICE agents to carry out deportations, which are being blocked by many states and local authorities, the possibility that Trump may actually invoke the law is becoming very real. He's saying he might do it. They're talking about doing it. The justification for doing it is there. He might do it. And Trump actually brought up the possibility last week at the Oval Office. Watch this.
President,
what?
The Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe.
Now, that's interesting, right? If President Trump is saying he might do it, that's one thing. If people around him are saying Donald Trump might do it, you know what that suggests? That suggests they're talking about it. That suggests word is going around. That suggests the issue has been raised and it's being deliberated. And guess what? On Sunday, Vice President J.D. Vance also talked about the ability, once again, on NBC's Meet the Press. Watch this.
Are you seriously considering invoking the Insurrection Act?
Well, the president's looking at all of his options. Right now, he hasn't felt he needed to, but we have to remember, why are we talking about this, Kristen? Because crime has gotten out of control in our cities, because our ICE agents, the people who are enforcing our immigration laws, have faced a 1,000% increase in violent attacks against them. We have people right now who are going out there, who are doing the job the president asked them to do, who are enforcing our immigration laws. They're being assaulted, they're being beaten, they're being shot at. The problem here is not the Insurrection Act or whether we actually invoke it or not. The problem is the fact that the entire media in this country, cheered on by a few far-left lunatics, have made it okay to tee off on American law enforcement. We cannot accept that in the United States of America. We want everybody, black or white, rich or poor, to be safe in the United States of America. But to do that, we have to empower our law enforcement agents to keep us safe. That's what we're talking about doing.
Interesting stuff, right? So, what is the Insurrection Act? Like, what does it actually do, right? The Epoch Times had a breakdown on it. It's pretty good. It said the law currently being considered by the administration has its roots in the 1792 legislation that allowed the federal government to call up state militias to, quote, execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection, and repel invasions. Because, very early on, of course, George Washington believed there was an insurrection among the democratic societies. He believed these were anti-constitution forces. He believes they were the main force behind the Whiskey Rebellion. George Washington called up the Continental Army, put down their rebellion. Now, it says here as well, the 1807 Insurrection Act expanded the original legislation, adding additional powers for the president, including the ability to deploy active duty federal troops. Federal meaning not even just the National Guard, like the military, like the full-on military. Not saying National Guard in the military, but full thing as well. Without the request or support of state government actors under limited circumstances. And what might those limited circumstances be? We'll get into it. But it says this. It says it provides some of the only exceptions to the Posse Comitatus Act, which is an 1878 law that generally forbids the use of military against American citizens. It says those exceptions include suppressing insurrections. An insurrection, people are trying to overthrow the government. Like if you're declaring you're going to start a communist revolution or create a global intifada, or, for example, do something to try to remove a sitting president from office by, spreading disinformation and then weaponizing the legal system to target him and his allies. Technically, That would be an insurrection. It could also be on enforcing federal authority. For example, if a state is blocking federal law enforcement, if hypothetically speaking, if ICE is going somewhere and they're trying to deport people and they're being attacked and the local government is not enforcing federal authority, they're allowing them to be attacked, rocks thrown at them, you could kind of declare an insurrection. You could actually use this. And also it says protecting civil rights when state authorities fail to act. So the civil rights of Americans, what could that include? Well, this is important because what did Trump recently declare in his executive actions? Remember Trump's recent action ordering the investigations of the hit piece machine, the mobilization machine, the funding behind groups like Antifa. You actually have the No Kings protests coming back. They just announced a new round of protests. Over 190 organizations wrapped up into that. Basically fomenting, actions against, you could say it's for the elections, but fomenting actions against ICE, against the president, and against, basically everything he's doing. The big issue Trump raised, though, in that document is important because it ties directly into this, protecting civil rights when state authorities fail to act, ties directly into this, which could also be used as justification. And this is what it said. It says that these systems of cancel culture, mobilizing people towards violence, of attacking anybody who dares speak out, making people too afraid to speak out, groups like Antifa terrorizing people if they dare to speak out. They say that what this does in effect, it is depriving American citizens of their rights. Violations of the rights of the American citizens, meaning I cannot freely exercise my freedom of speech. I cannot exercise the freedom of the press. I cannot exercise the freedom of my belief or the right to mobilization because I'm too afraid of being doxxed, attacked, and terrorized. And Trump is now labeling those systems as terrorist factions. Meaning, in what is happening right now, Trump has actually set up the justification to declare the Insurrection Act. Now, further in it says this, the president is authorized upon the request of a state legislature or governor. And, some governors are more pro-Trump, many are not, especially the ones where you have issues like this. But state legislatures would be easier because, conservatives do have more control over that, over state legislatures. Even in places where the governor might be a Democrat, state legislatures do lean more Republican. But also at the state legislature level, you have a lot of areas where you have freedom caucuses, which are very, Trump-aligned type caucuses within the state legislature. It says they can call into service or request Trump to call into service the militia or other states to assist in suppressing an insurrection. And it's important to note this would be in addition to the other elements because this is about state militias. And that's, of course, the National Guard, right? The militia technically would be the National Guard, at least in terms of what the state could call in, like the official system for it. Remember, too, though, that the Insurrection Act is not limited just to militias or the National Guard. It's federal. It's also federal military, meaning this is an additional power. It says this as well, though. The president is required to order insurgents to disperse and retire peaceably when activating any of these provisions. And last I checked, Donald Trump has given many warnings like this. People don't take it that seriously, but his statements on Truth Social, warning these groups, telling them to disperse, to stand down, to quote-unquote retire, Trump has done that. I think according to law, he's done more than enough to justify it by this point. And not to say he won't just make a straight up post, disperse and retire, or I will come down upon thee. He might do that too. Now, it notes here, though, this is not the first time this would happen. The last time it says a law was invoked was 1992. That was President George H.W. Bush. That was his term amid the deadly riots in Los Angeles. It says, following a jury acquittal of Los Angeles Police Department officers after the arrest and beating of Rodney King. That was, of course, black man. There was more details to it, but police did, have some issues with use of force, let's say. That sparked large-scale riots in Los Angeles. There's the famous images, for example, or videos of people celebrating. They pulled a truck driver's car, smashed his head with a rock. These are the protesters. You had people looting, burning. It was terrible. And President Bush at the time did call in the Insurrection Act to put that down. And anybody notably who was on the streets during the LA riots got a felony. So it was very serious. And now it's this. Decades before, the Insurrection Act was invoked in the 1960s in response to state resistance to federal desegregation efforts during the Civil Rights Movement. Famous videos, famous images, of course. For example, National Guard escorting black students into schools because they were being attacked. People were challenging it. They didn't want them in their schools. They got protection to protect their civil rights. It turned out that everybody has civil rights if you're an American citizen, and you can't suppress that. And if there's a state effort to suppress it, the federal government is then justified to move in and protect the civil rights of Americans. It's interesting now that Trump has actually invoked the Civil Rights Act on identity politics, on the race issue, on the gender issue, suggesting that many of the DEI policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are actually themselves violations of Civil Rights Act laws, because they deprive the rights of people of, the targeted races, white people, straight people, people who just, their religious belief does not support, like, homosexuality. It's them whose rights are being deprived now because it kind of went too far in the other direction. And that's the narrative. Agree with it or not, that is what Trump has been saying. And that is the way he may actually invoke this. Given the current situation, breaking it down, this is what we can observe. Trump has established the justification for it. He's made many calls to disperse, many calls telling people to stand down, effectively saying, hey, this is your last warning. He's used terrorist designations. He has used the labeling of individuals working as a type of racketeering, working to suppress the rights, the civil rights of Americans. He's used this to say they're depriving the rights of Americans, going against even basic constitutional rights. He has established that local governments are acting against federal law enforcement, allowing them to be blocked, beaten, even threatened, their lives threatened in many cases, people ramming their cars, even shooting at them, people firing at ICE facilities, and again, blocking police from assisting ICE. And there have even been, recorded phone calls of local authorities saying this. Trump does have the justification on that. He's actually nailed down all the key areas of justification. The main issue we'd have to look at then is, will he do it? Well, Trump says a lot of things. He kind of acts on what he says he's going to do more than people want to give him credit for. But the fact that he's talking about it would suggest that he's communicating the possibility. And the fact that J.D. Vance talked about it suggests it is being discussed within the Oval Office at least. And so it is very possible Trump may do this. Now, on another point related to this, President Donald Trump has also ordered investigations into the funding network behind the far-left political violence in the United States. Who's behind it? Who's paying for it? Who's organizing it? They want the answers of all of this. Trump has suggested they might use RICO charges, racketeering, and also terror designations against basically the entire network. If you've assisted them, if you so much as work for one of these organizations, you could be investigated. Now, understand how RICO charges work. When the government wants to go and take down the mafia, when they want to take down a terror network, what do? They go after the low-level guys first. They arrest them, they interrogate them, and they say, look, you're facing some pretty serious charges. Here's the deal. You wear a little wire, you go and talk to your higher up, get them on record. You will have legal, protection on this. They will be charged. You will walk free. Otherwise, it's not looking so good for you. When they're suggesting they could go after all the employees of these organizations, what does that suggest? It suggests they're working to get informants who will rat out the higher-ups. They're actually moving on this right now. And what's interesting as well, FBI Director Kash Patel is saying that the agency, the FBI, is right now, as we speak, following the money. They're looking into the groups and the individuals who are financing and organizing groups like Antifa, and there are groups funding it. There are groups working on the training, and others also engaged in political violence and intimidation. NTD, which is the sister media of the Epoch Times, Crossroads also airs on NTD. They actually had the exclusive interview with Kash Patel on this. This was from his appearance on the Armstrong Williams show. Watch this.
They're up in arms over George Soros and Open Roads as to whether or not his Open Roads Foundation is supporting terrorist organizations that are anti-America and goes against the better interests of our nation.
So organizations, I can't speak to that directly.
George Soros.
And because I can't comment on whether or not we have an actual investigation. But
okay, that's fair.
Speaking to matters like Antifa, for example, right? And the new EO that the president signed and their designations giving us authorities that we never had. What we are able to do is the one thing I've done my entire career under investigations. Follow the money. Serve legal process and follow the money. These groups just don't show up overnight. You don't have hundreds of people surround a courthouse overnight and then move down to LA and cause riots and then move halfway across the country and cause disruptions in Chicago and elsewhere. It is an organized effort that someone or some groups are paying for. And what I can tell the American people is we have open investigations on multiple groups and individuals funding these efforts. We have legal process that has already been executed. The search warrant results are coming in, but also remind the American people that they want, or not they, the American public, for the most part, understands that it takes time to develop these complicated investigations. But in the days of social media and the 24/7 news cycle, people want immediacy. And if you abide by that requirement, then you will fail in your investigative duties.
Should the U.S. formally designate the domestic groups as terrorist organization? If not, what's, Mr. Director, the right to RICO, material support analogs, or case-by-case prosecutions that avoid criminalizing an ideology?
Yes, I think Antifa, specifically speaking, as an example, we have to recognize these groups for what they are. If we as a society just allow these riots to continue, then we as a society are going to be engulfed by the criminal activity these people are doing. LA. You can't attack law enforcement. You can't throw rocks and boulders at law enforcement. You can't in DC assault law enforcement. In Portland, you can't set fire to a federal building and get away with it. How is that acceptable? And it's all being caused. It's not individual acts of violence. It is organized anarchy and chaos. And thanks to the president's initiatives, and when I was there in the Oval Office when he signed it, we are getting after the fight with more resources and tools than we've ever had.
Now, that's a pretty big deal. Because, you know, what that suggests is that Trump's order didn't just fall on deaf ears. Yeah, and we did see that, let's be honest with ourselves. You know, Trump's first term in office, a lot of what he said, you know, do it, carry out the orders. His administration oftentimes was working against him. During Trump's first term in office, you know, FBI Director James Comey was not very pro-Trump, let's say. And so Trump had a lot of trouble getting things done. You know, they were investigating the president at the time. This is a very different time for President Trump. And so what Kash is suggesting here is that this is not just falling on deaf ears. This is not an empty order. He's saying that they are actually doing something. Now, you know, Kash Patel being the head of the FBI, he can't talk about specifics, especially if they have an ongoing investigation, but he does talk about, quote unquote, following the money. And that's important because that's what Trump said to do, basically. Look at who's funding these groups, who's behind it, who's organizing it, get the entire network, hit them with RICO. That's what Trump is saying. And Kash says they have multiple investigations into who is funding the individuals starting up protests and various other activities that we're seeing, meaning a lot of organizations, frankly. There's a lot of them behind it. One of the big ones that has been named, including in the recent White House briefing, is the Tides Foundation. You also have this Mr. Singh, again, in Shanghai, China. You have individuals like George Soros actually tied in with some of this funding, although it's through a few different channels. They've all been named, actually. Important note as well, Tides Foundation also gets money and tied in with other things. It's also tied in with some of the major, you know, kind of far-left movements. It's tied into actually the Wikipedia parent company, the group behind Wikipedia. They're actually part of Tides. And also they get a lot of money from Google. And that could be a very big deal. Now, Kash Patel on this, he also talks about the use of RICO, right? Racketeering charges, things that take down a mafia. And Kash notes groups like Antifa and the mass protests we're seeing where people are, you know, being attacked by, you know, attacking federal agents. Kash notes these are not individual acts of violence. It is organized acts of chaos. Organized as in organized crime. Because what they're saying is that if you're carrying out crime in an organized manner, what does that mean? You are an organized criminal syndicate. And they have now been labeled also as terrorists. That's a very big deal on this. Look, on another topic, though, the government shutdown's still underway. Trump seems to not mind so much he's using it, because among the key issues is whether or not American taxpayers should be footing the bill to give free health care to illegal aliens. That's actually one of the big topics with this, and I will be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Well, the federal government is still technically shut down, right? They didn't get the funding bill. The government shutdown is still underway. And among the big arguments, hey, what do you want to reopen it? Well, it turns out the thing they want to reopen it is tax dollars to give free health care to illegal aliens, people who are not citizens of the United States. Now, it's being framed in other ways. They're not saying, hey, we want to give free health care to all the illegal aliens. They're saying we want to give free health care to everyone, including illegal aliens. And this is now bringing more attention to the issue, actually. People are becoming aware of it. Americans are paying attention to it. And it's not looking so good. Let's just put it that way. It turns out, at least in Oregon, more money is going to fund free health care to illegal aliens than is even being given to fund the local police. Daily Caller said this. It said Oregon will spend more in its current budget period on free health care for immigrants, they mean illegal aliens here, regardless of legal status, than on state police by $500 million or more, according to state officials and budget documents. So, folks, next time you go and, write your taxes to the IRS, next time you pay that good old sales tax, next time, you're wanting to just, pay good old Uncle Sam, just remember your tax dollars are helping your local illegal alien get free health care. And rest assured that you're helping those poor folks. And notes here that Oregon officials expect to spend $1.5 billion in combined state and federal taxpayer dollars on a program that offers health benefits to illegal aliens from 2025 to 2027. They expect to spend $717 million on Oregon State Police over the same period, the documents indicate, meaning about double the budget. About twice the amount you're spending on police is going to pay for free health care for illegal aliens. Now, it says the state's health agency, the Oregon Health Authority, said in an email to the Daily Caller News Foundation that the state expects to allocate $1.2 billion to the program, originally named, quote, Cover All People, and now called the Healthier Oregon Program. Presumably they changed the name because people now understand what it means to cover all people. Because that's the political slogan right now. Health care for everyone. That's the political slogan, and it doesn't work like it used to. It used to be cover everybody. You're like, okay, me, my kids, my neighbors, my family. Not cover everyone, as in literally everyone. It says Oregon lays out budgets in 2-year bienniums, and the federal government will supply 25% of the funding to provide health benefits to illegal aliens in Oregon, the OHA told the Daily Caller News Foundation. So it's real. But on that point, actually, free healthcare for illegals is actually becoming a pretty sensitive topic. Not like you can't talk about it, but this is becoming politically really damaging for Democrats. And actually, the federal shutdown, Trump basically the Democrats shutting it down, but Trump repeatedly just blaming them for it. Trump repeatedly saying this is theirs and saying, look, the reason it's shut down is because they wanted to give free healthcare to illegal aliens so badly that they were willing to do this. That is the degree of importance they place on giving free healthcare to illegal immigrants. And that's becoming really politically damaging to them. So much so that actually a lot of Democrats now are actually making an effort to end this system. They're actually backing off it. They're trying to bring an end to it. It's actually changing things. National Review said this. It says President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration has earned no shortage of condemnation from progressive governors across the country. So it may be surprising that many blue state leaders are quietly rolling back health coverage for people without legal status. Interesting, right? It says over the past few months, Democratic governors in California, Minnesota, Illinois have arrived at the same conclusion. It is not practical to offer taxpayer-funded health insurance to undocumented immigrants. So California, Minnesota, Illinois, that's Tim Walz, that's Gavin Newsom. They're actually quietly ending it. They're actually bringing it into that policy. And look, on another topic, something pretty big, Donald Trump actually has gone and done it. Trump has somehow, against all odds, managed to bring peace to the Middle East. Trump successfully negotiated the peace deal between Hamas and Israel. Something that many have pointed out, if any other president were to do it, it would be praised universally. He'd probably get the Nobel Peace Prize for doing that, which Trump was not given this time around, but the winner of it did actually donate it effectively, or honor Trump with it, saying he should have gotten it. But what has happened now? The last hostages were returned to Israel. The last people were being held by Hamas. Peace may in fact be coming to the Middle East. You have Trump now working with the Saudis. It looks like things are just rapidly changing. Pro-Gaza protesters, well, they're actually still out there, but rather than protest the genocide, they're actually protesting the peace deal. Pro-Gaza protesters are now protesting the fact that the war is ending for some reason. And President Trump, well, you might expect, he is throwing his fist in the air and taking a victory lap and saying, look what I've gone and done now. This is part of the speech that he gave yesterday. This is during a Middle East peace ceremony in Egypt. Watch this.
Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. At long last, we have peace in the Middle East, and it's a very simple expression, peace in the Middle East, and we've heard it for many years, but nobody thought it could ever get there, and now we're there. I want to congratulate everybody sitting in these first few rows and standing behind me. I don't know why they chose to stand, but I promise I'll make it short, okay? We are not going to keep you standing for long. These are great leaders. After years of suffering and bloodshed, the war in Gaza is over. Humanitarian aid is now pouring in, including hundreds of truckloads of food, medical equipment, and other supplies, much of it paid for by people in this room. Civilians are returning to their homes. The hostages are reuniting. I mean, it's beautiful.
And hey, it's not just Trump saying it. Trump is actually winning praise from people you might not expect. Watch this.
It's a really significant first step, and I really commend President Trump and his administration, as well as Arab leaders in the region, for making the commitment to the 20-point plan and seeing a path forward for what's often called the day after.
Well, hey, credit where credit's due, right? Let's just say that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have not had the best relationship between last decade. It's actually a big deal that she's coming out and saying that. again, credit where credit's due. Good on her for saying that. Good on Trump for negotiating. Big deal, actually. It really is a big deal. And, it doesn't look like all wars are ending just yet, though. Some are going the other way. The war between Russia and Ukraine, for example, still ongoing. And it looks like Trump is actually shifting his position a bit. Trump was pretty critical of Volodymyr Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, for a good while. He was not very nice to him. Trump was suggesting that we're not going to supply Ukraine in the war so much. It looked like he was going to work more with Vladimir Putin in Russia. Trump had a whole peace deal offered. And it looks like now Trump has shifted. Trump is now saying that Russia is, the one not wanting it. He says Putin maybe has given him the runaround, and Trump is now siding pretty heavily with Ukraine now. Trump has said that he believes Ukraine can win the war. And Trump is actually now moving to give additional support to Ukraine to help them win the war. Financial Times said this. It says the U.S. has for months been helping Ukraine mount long-range strikes on Russian energy facilities. And what officials say is a coordinated effort to weaken Vladimir Putin's economy and force him to the negotiating table. Now, that's a really big deal. And why is it? It's because basically, again, side with whichever you want on a war. I'm not going to tell you who's right and who's wrong. I have my viewpoints, but I don't believe as a journalist, sitting in the comfort of my studio, I have the right to, denigrate people when they're having bombs dropped on their faces. But this is interesting strategic-wise, and let me explain. The problem Ukraine has had with negotiations is they've had basically their hands tied behind their backs. They've basically been purely defense. If you're only playing defense, you're going to lose eventually. Because what it means is this. When you go to the negotiating table and you say, okay, everybody put your cards down, what do you have? You say, well, you took all this from me, I took zero from you, I'll meet you halfway. You can only lose in a negotiation because you have nothing to play on. You have nothing to negotiate on. The fact that Ukraine has not been able to launch long-range strikes, the fact they've not really been able to take territory, very little bit, has made it so that when it comes to the negotiations, they have nothing to play on. They don't have any cards to play. I know Trump used that analogy, and it's a whole thing, but it is true. They don't have cards to play. If Ukraine wants to have something to negotiate with, they need to have territory. They need to say, look, keep doing this, and we're gonna do it again, or they have nothing to go on. Russia right now has been playing purely offense, not really defense. They can, of course, launch continued attacks. They can continue launching, long-range strikes. They're striking deep into Ukraine. They're getting additional support from North Korea, from the Chinese Communist Party, armaments. They can keep it going for a long time. Ukraine, purely on the defense, you can't defend forever. That's the reality of any war, even sports. If you're playing pure defense, you're going to lose eventually. And so what does this mean now that Trump is engaging with this? What are the targets? Economy and energy. What does that mean? That means it's things that will impact the quality of life and the financial system of Russia. What does it mean if you target the quality of life? It means the Russian people may stop supporting Putin. And if Trump can make life hard for the average Russian, hey, you killed my son and my grandson in this war, glory to the country, but then the lights don't turn on and it's wintertime and it gets a little cold in Russia. Or if your factory is shut down, you can't put bread on the table. Things start getting a little different. And so Trump now targeting energy, targeting the systems that keep Russia running, targeting systems of the economy, even going after countries buying oil from Russia. That is when it starts to hurt. That affects basic social stability and also impacts the ability of Russia to buy goods from other countries. Because, if they can keep things going, they can keep selling, they can keep buying, it's one thing. But if they're not able to, if they're going into debt every single day, hey, I'll give you an IOU, and China's, CCP is price gouging them. They really do price gouge them. That is the long-term survival of Russia. That is a long-term stability of the country. That is the long-term support that Putin has among the people. And that's also the basic quality of life among the Russians. that might force them to the negotiating table. And it does seem to be that's what Trump's aiming for here. Now further on it says this. American intelligence shared with Kyiv has enabled strikes on important Russian energy assets, including oil refineries far beyond the front line, according to multiple Ukrainian and U.S. officials familiar with the campaign. It says the previously unreported support has intensified since midsummer and has been crucial in helping Ukraine carry out attacks that Joe Biden's White House discouraged. They didn't want him doing it before, remember. It says Kyiv strikes have driven up energy prices in Russia and prompted Moscow to cut diesel exports and import fuel. That's a big deal if they're importing rather than just exporting, because that's kind of their main backbone of their economy. It says the intelligence sharing is the latest sign that Trump has deepened his support for Ukraine as his frustration with Russia has grown. Very big deal. Trump, of course, I think his long-term goal, he also wants a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. He wants a peace deal that doesn't fall into the CCP's hands, because the Chinese Communist Party, they're the puppeteer on the other side. Trump does not want that. And so the fact that Trump is now getting engaged in this, Russia had a very good peace deal on its side. Ukraine basically got very little out of the former peace deal. This next one will probably be much less in Russia's favor and a lot more in Zelensky's favor as it moves forward. All right, folks, that said, a lot to talk about. Questions, comments, anything you want to discuss, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. Let's see here. First off, let me see what I got in the chat. Okay, first, Ashley from California. You're saying the Insurrection Act is a start, but can we be somewhat proactive for the future and the wise education system to not be an anti-American propaganda machine? That's a great point, Ashley. Yeah, so, okay. That's a good point. Okay, so what has been happening in the United States for the past decade, right? A lot of people note, okay, let's put it this way. If you were to look back, when did you see Americans start really turning against each other? When did you see the race politics come up? When did you first start hearing about transgenderism as being like a political, argument, right? If you go back to the 90s, the only place you saw transgender was drag queen shows or, which were more like comedian type things, or you saw it in movies, and it was usually serial killers like Silence of the Lambs, right? That was about the only place you ever heard of it. It was not mainstream at all. What was the situation among race politics in America in the 90s? If you watched movies, watch Blade, right? Go and watch the old Matrix movies. The original ones are fantastic. Nobody really thought, oh, Morpheus is a black male, oh, strong female character. We didn't really think like this. The propagandizing of Americans, where we've kind of been programmed to pay attention, what race is the person? Is this a political thing if they make, someone white black or someone black white? Is this politics? We did not used to even have that concept. It wouldn't even occur to us back in the day. When did that change, right? When did that change? Well, in reality, it changed towards the end of the Obama administration, right? It changed with, of course, Trayvon Martin, who was killed, not by a police officer, but by a local, town watch guy who was, I believe Zimmerman was Jewish and Latino. He wasn't white. And so, that created the whole narrative of this. Then you had Black Lives Matter trying to spark incidents. President Obama invited people to the White House. He brought in all these race narrative guys, and he brought about this whole new narrative of, racial tensions in America. We need to fight the institutional racism and all that stuff. And from then on, America really started changing. Then the New York Times wrote a false history of America, the 1619 Project. That was falsified, fake history. Their own fact checker said it was fake. They published it anyway. And then Obama created, of course, Common Core education, more like federal education, state-run education. And they implemented the 1619 Project, this fake falsified history of America, into Common Core education. So you have generations of Americans now who've been raised with all these notions, this false understanding of America, this idea that race politics are everything, gender politics. You have kids who've been raised in schools where they're, divided up. Are you a victim? Are you an oppressor? Are you an ally? If you're aligned with them, you're an ally, suggesting that if you don't agree with them, you're an enemy. And, from kindergarten up through high school into college, you have kids being raised like this. So whole generations who were in college during that time, they were taught that. Whole generations who were in high school and then college, they were taught that. And the worst off are probably the ones who were in, kindergarten at the time. And for a decade, their entire schooling, they've been taught this. And so they've been taught to hate America. They've been taught that America is historically evil. They've been taught the founding fathers are the bad guys. They've been taught that, race, if you're white, you're like automatically the enemy of the allies, which, has been the narrative. They've been taught this whole alternative view of the peaceful Native Americans who were totally not going to war with each other and enslaving each other as well, as all people did, right? You're not going to find a race on earth that doesn't have some blood on its hands. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? That's human nature. It's not a race thing. Every race has dark parts of their history. You're not going to find any that don't. But kids aren't being taught this. They're being taught there are good ones and bad ones. There are allies and enemies. And if you want to be an ally, you need to fight the enemy, which they've labeled politically basically the entire conservative movement. And then what else have they been fed? Social media, censorship. If you say certain things on the internet, you get kicked off. You get labeled, you get doxxed, you get attacked, and you're justified in attacking them. The media institutions have been labeling, attacking, defaming, the whole 9 yards. Anybody who's, MAGA or MAGA extremists, or, if you're a person who just doesn't follow like these things, that you're somehow a fascist. And what do you do to fascists? Well, you fight fascists, right? Obviously. They've been fed this. And so you have people who've been radicalized, really radicalized. You have people who've been, from a more conventional standpoint, completely radicalized into hatred and violence. And I'm not saying it goes just one way. The other side too is if you've been attacked, a lot of people might say, geez, I've been attacked. I need to defend myself. And what's the quote unquote reactionary response? It's you hate them right back. And so this tension has been fed. They've been feeding this tension. It's a terrible situation for a country to be in, actually. I do hope that one day they can find a way to cool these tensions. And, Ashley, you're noting that maybe the solution to that is, fix the education system. There is actually a point on that. Yuri Bezmenov, Soviet defector, he was, one of the propagandists under the Soviet Union. He worked at the KGB. Defected to Canada, actually, and of course came out and did some very famous interviews about what the Soviets were doing. He talked about demoralization, destabilization, conflict, and the eventual takeover of the United States. And he said the only way you fix this is you have to educate a new generation. That was actually his only solution. He didn't believe that people who've been brainwashed and radicalized, he doesn't think they can turn back. He thinks that once you've been dragged in that direction, it's very hard to return. He thinks that people whose brains have been addled by these narratives, it's very hard to change. He says impossible. It's complete. The demoralization is complete. Now, I don't think that. I do think people have shown the truth. They can change, although it might be a gradual process. And I'd ask all of you here, how many of you had a big wake-up moment, in the past 5 to 10 years? Tell me. How many of you here used to believe all these things and then realized it wasn't true? How many of you here had your big moment and were like, wow, it's not what I thought it was? A lot of people did, right? I think COVID was a big wake-up call for a lot of people. We've had other ones, but a lot of people had their moment, right? A lot of people had that click. So I don't agree with Bezmenov on that point. Seeing where you woke up this morning, good on you. Right? A lot of people did have one of those moments where something just clicked, right? It just changed for them. So I don't agree with Bezmenov that it's irreversible, but I do think he's right, and as Ashley says here, that you need to fix the education system, because the education system is a time bomb. The education system, if not repaired, if it doesn't start feeding love for your neighbor and love for your country, and at the very least just having an accurate view of history, it's a time bomb that will eventually tear down our country, because that's what kids are being taught right now. They're being taught to hate what we stand for. Martin McKenzie, you're saying, so glad the Trump administration is saying the quiet part out loud. Trump has a history of doing that, by the way. You're saying that, but not the whole administration. You're saying there are organized, well-funded efforts to overthrow our Constitution. That's accurate. Actually, there was a very famous, there was an incident. I wouldn't call it famous because it's not very well known. But I knew the guy. I knew the guy who did it. In Trump's first term in office, he was warned about this. He was warned about it. One of the main heads of, on the intelligence side under the Trump administration, when Trump first came in, issued a warning to President Trump. It was called The Memo. The Memo. He wrote a book, I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book about it. It was actually called The Memo. And what he warned Donald Trump of was there was a color revolution being organized to push him out of office and change the American system. He was actually fired for it. He was actually fired from his job and went on to actually run like an alternate kind of underground, military intelligence guy network where they were trying to expose this stuff. But he ended up dying during COVID, actually. Really tragic, actually. I don't know what really caused his death. His family think that it might have been, complications of the vaccine. But, he had a lot of other health problems. So we don't really know what killed him. But he wrote a book called The Memo. And this is what he warned about. This is what he warned about. He said there was a color revolution planned, organized, and currently being implemented to overthrow the U.S. government from within. And again, he was fired for it. He got fired for saying that. He got fired for warning, not by Trump, but by other people in the intel community. He got fired for doing that. You can still find his book online on Amazon. It is called The Memo. If you want to find it, and you can just look it up, because it would talk about the color revolution against Trump, and that would be the one. TZ Burton. You're saying, I am seeing illegals using our health care in Washington State. It took a month to get doctor's appointment because of this. Yeah, well, it's complicated, because this is the problem we have in America. Look, if I want to get health care, it's expensive. I don't know if that's the case for all of you. It's even being acknowledged by a lot of, moderate Democrats that Obamacare, it's not really affordable for most Americans. They called it the Affordable Care Act. For most of us, it is not affordable. For most of us, we were paying a lot less money for just normal health insurance. Does anybody remember how much Blue Cross and Blue Shield costed prior to Obamacare? I know my dad was saying he was paying like $100 like a month or a year. It wasn't much at all. But under Obamacare, because he does his own businesses, right? It's like $2,000 a year. It's a lot of money. And and it costs even more if you make even more money. For me, working at a company, of course, if you work in a big company, the company gives it to you because of the requirements. But for a lot of Americans, it's not affordable at all. It's really expensive. Now, many people would say, and I would agree to it, that Obamacare was never meant to be the be-all, end-all. It was meant to be temporary. The goal of Obamacare was not to work. The goal of Obamacare was meant to not work and be the first step towards single-payer health care. That was what everybody was saying. I'm not giving rumors here, like even a lot of the Democrats were saying that. What they really wanted was single-payer health care. Obamacare was not supposed to be forever. It totally was not. And it's kind of become that way. And so, on that side of it, it's an issue because, you could say, well, illegal aliens can't get free health care. That's true, technically. But they do through other ways. How do they do it? Well, what happened since then is some states, California was one of the big ones on this, but, others as well, when they started giving out ID cards, when they started giving out driver's licenses to just anybody, and they stopped requiring proof of citizenship, that was when it made it so that they couldn't ask you, are you an American citizen or not? Interestingly, does anybody else think it was a bit odd that the timing of not asking for proof of citizenship for driver's licenses also happened when they started registering you to vote when you apply for a driver's license? Isn't that weird? Anyways, I think what is interesting, though, with free healthcare for illegals is when they stopped asking for proof of citizenship, even though technically they're not supposed to get it, if they're not asking, then who's going to tell, right? Hey, you want to apply for free healthcare and social welfare and free housing, and we're not allowed to ask you if you're an American citizen or not. Like, of course they're going to apply for it. And people did. A lot of people did. That's one side of it. The other side of it is the emergency room system. The emergency room can't really deny you care. If you're homeless people kind of game it all the time. For them it's a free bed and a free meal, and some of them just use it for that. But there are also people from other countries, pregnant women, people with really serious health problems. They just go to the emergency room. And the emergency room system, if you're not on the books or if you don't have money, that's a free healthcare system. It's not saying it's free, though. Like, we foot the bill. We pay the difference. When you go to the doctor and you pay like 5 times what you would be paying in like any normal country, the reason you're paying so much, it's partly because of insurance for doctors, because as Americans, we have a lawsuit problem. Americans are lawsuit obsessed. We sue everybody for some reason. I do think it's a terrible part of our culture, the lawsuit culture. We sue each other way too much. That's part of it. But the other part is you're paying the difference. You're paying the difference of all those people getting free health care. And that's what's happening. And I think I don't know how they're going to fix the emergency room system, by the way, because what are you going to do if a woman's going into labor and she shows up at the emergency room? Like, you're going to kick her to the curb? Or, a guy shows up and he's been in a car accident. Are you going to deny care? You can't do that. I think the only solution would be you need to hold them accountable for payment outside the U.S. or something. They need to fix that, but I don't know what the solution is, because they can't really deny care when it's really needed, right? It's complicated. Ryan D. Sue, unless they deport him, right? Ryan D. Sue. You're saying it's only affordable if the government subsidizes it. So Ray and Sue, I'm sorry. It's only affordable if the government subsidizes it. Yeah, isn't that funny how that works, right? I've said it before and I'll say it again. Socialism, communism is subsidized failure. It allows for things that should not work to work. And what does that mean? If you do it too much, you basically have a failed system. Socialism institutionalizes failure in every institution it touches. And what do I mean by that? You have things that don't actually work. Now, in a normal, healthy economy, if something can stand on its own 2 feet, it works. People want it, it makes money, it's in high enough demand, it's sustainable because there are systems in place among the normal, doesn't need outside support. It can function, right? Socialism tries to, if a business is going out of business and it gets subsidized, it prevents failure. By preventing failure, you also prevent them from, kind of reevaluating the system and finding ways to make it work. And that's how you get problems with, bread lines and, Potemkin village type stuff, or factories that manufacture nothing and keep the lights on. If you overdo it, your entire system is a failed system. You do it a little bit, you're going to have a few failed industries. It always works like that. Socialism is subsidized failure. It subsidizes failure, and it creates failed systems because of that. Now, some people would question, well, Josh, what about healthcare? What about healthcare? I can say that we need to rethink the entire way we view it, because I know how it used to be. My father-in-law was, he was in Cambodia, one of the few physicians. They only had about less than 20, I think, physicians in the entire country. He had been trained in France, and he took the Hippocratic Oath. He was the physician to the king. He was also the physician to some of the poorest people in the country. And the way that doctors used to work was this. It was on them. They took the Hippocratic Oath. They took an oath to save people's lives. And I'm not saying they were all perfect. You had some who were in it for the money, sure, but most of them, for the most part, weren't like that. My father-in-law, he would treat the king. He would also go to the countryside and treat people who had not a dollar to their name. They'd pay him in fruit. They'd give him fruit, like a fruit basket, as the way of payment, because they had no money. And if you look at the way that doctors used to function, I'm talking like 1940s, 1930s, right? I'm talking pretty early on. That was normal. That was a lot more normal. And so, he was actually telling me that him and his, doctor colleagues were actually talking to themselves. And they said that once medicine becomes a business, when medicine becomes a business, medicine as we know it will come to an end. And I do think that's kind of what's happened. Medicine has become a business. People don't go into it because they want to save lives. People go into it because they want to make a lot of money. I'm not saying all doctors are like that, but there is, without a doubt, the pharmaceutical industry, people doing some really kind of dirty business type things, and I think this has actually really tainted a lot of the medical industry. There are still many who abide by the Hippocratic Oath. There are many who do not, and that is unfortunate the way the business has gone. So, what is the solution? Well, maybe we need to restore medicine back to what it used to be. It's an oath to save lives, and that is the motivation that doctors used to have. A lot of them, right? All right, everyone, that said, thank you all so much for being here. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, let me know what you think. Is there a solution to the medical system? Can we fix it? What do you think about the Insurrection Act? Is that crazy? Do you think Donald Trump is doing something insane, or do you think it's needed? Let me know in the chat. I want to hear your thoughts on it. That said, join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, please do not forget, like and share this video. Tell a friend or family member about Crossroads. It helps us quite a bit. I'll see you all tomorrow, and in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.